everyone. Welcome back to YinRadioTV. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Have you ever felt like everything around you is a lie? Everything from history, science, government, banking, money, law, economics, farming, energy production, water treatment, healthcare, even spirituality. Well, tonight my guest and I we're going to be talking about this and much, much more. Brad Olsen joins me tonight. His book, Future Esoteric and Modern Esoteric. We're going to be talking about all kinds of great stuff. Thanks for joining me. Welcome, Brad.
Hi there, Hillary. Thanks for having me on. It's great to connect with you finally and be a guest on your show.
Well, I was going to read your bio off your website, but instead of doing that, I just drastically changed my mind and decided to let you introduce yourself to the viewers. Who are you? Where do you come from? What are you all about?
Hey, okay, great. Well, I guess the quick bio is my name is Brad Olsen. I'm an author, publisher, and event producer here in San Francisco, California. Talk about each one of those, but generally tell people I got my start by traveling around the world. I was an English teacher in Japan in the early 1990s. Spent 3 years traveling around the world, and then started my author career as a travel writer. My first book is called World Stompers, a global travel manifesto, and it's how to get young people motivated to take a trip around the world themselves. It's still in print and still sells. So that got me started in travel, and that took me all the way up to the Sacred Places series of books, which I did about 10 years ago. And then had sort of an existential crisis in publishing because the travel section has been greatly influenced by the rise of the internet, that many people can just research and find whatever destination they want to go to and get all the information they want off the internet. So not sure if you've noticed, but the travel aisle in most bookstores has shrank tremendously.
Well, so that fits into kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, because part of getting ready for the show, I was reading through your material and you brought up a great point, which was the internet has enabled people to gain access to so much information that we're actually able to break down the paradigm, the old paradigm of control and the way that the cabal and the New World Order and these families that control the resources on this planet and everything that happens that keeps us enslaved kind of gives us an opportunity to go into, you know, the internet and find information to kind of dig our way out of it. So it doesn't surprise me. I'm sorry that your book sales have gone down because of it, but thankfully, because of the internet, we have an ability to be able to do that. So when you started on your journey, I always ask my guests this, what was the catalyst that began, you know, your passion to wanting to research all of this material, because your books are just filled with material and information, a wide variety of different topics. How did it all start for you?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because it does tie into not only the esoteric books, but also the Sacred Places guidebooks, and that is towards the end of my 3-year trip around the world. I went to Egypt, and I had the incredible opportunity. Maybe it was just a youthful indiscretion because I got shouted down the first time, but the second time I tried, I was actually able to climb to the top of the Great Pyramid and had an epiphany moment up there. It was actually quite incredible.
Wow.
And then I got down and almost got caught on my escape, made it out of there, and sort of changed my whole perspective and realized not only that the Great Pyramid is so much more than what we've been told, and just to look at it in so many different ways, as I did in the Sacred Places books. I wrote about it in Sacred Places Around the World, and also in Modern Esoteric that you have right there with you, that there are just so many more questions that arise that are being answered. And it also happened to have been, that book, in March of 1993, during the full moon, in fact, when I climbed to the top of the Great Pyramid, the very next week, which I didn't find out until years later, but it was at the same time frame that I was there, was actually a very pivotal moment in Egyptology, or I should say countering Egyptology, because the German scientist named Rudolf Gattenbrink was there 1 week later with his little robot that went up the shaft of the Queen's chamber in the Great Pyramid and discovered their before unknown new door that they're now finally finding a way to get through. Well, Gattenbrink, he had done a couple other trips to Egypt after that, as well as a team that had done some sonar scanning of the Giza Plateau and found that there are many chambers and passageways below it. They all got kicked out by Zahi Hawass and the Egyptologists.
Of course
no surprise there, but a very pivotal moment to allow people like me into a new perspective that there is much more to the Giza Plateau and the Great Pyramid than we've been allowed to know.
So I just came back from Egypt.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if I didn't think you knew that. Yeah, so your catalyst was the Great Pyramid then, basically.
Yes.
Right? On the full moon at the top.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much better than that, I don't think. Wow, what an amazing story. Have you been back? Have you been back since then?
And I've never been back.
Wow.
I will be back, but for now it was just a one and done.
A one-time thing, and look what it led to. It led to all of this magic and amazingness. So the esoteric aspect. Have you always had an interest in esoteric studies and symbolism, or was this something that was spurred on by your Egypt pilgrimage?
It was certainly spurred on by that, but it was basically this watershed moment in another way, because one, it got me into doing the Sacred Places books some years later. But then the Sacred Places books kind of reached a plateau or a certain endpoint where I really couldn't go further with the research, take it into the next phase. And there certainly are many phases to the research, especially of the Great Pyramid and some of the other monuments in Egypt. And so this existential moment I was telling you about 10 years ago was when I realized it's not going to happen with travel, even though the Sacred Places series was very successful and still does well. And I still get offers to be on History Channel shows or promote them in different ways. And I'm still very interested in keeping them going. But I realized the travel aisles are shrinking. Expanding on this series probably isn't a good thing. And I thought, what do I really love? What do I really feel passionate about learning and then writing and publishing about? And the answer to that are these esoteric subjects. And I realized that these are subjects that are not always going to be in favor with everyone. But that is the nature of the word esoteric, that these are subjects that are just sought out by a select few and really only understood and studied by a select few people. And for those people, they will find that these books will be invaluable. But other people, if they basically watch the news every night and that's their paradigm, the blue pill from the Matrix, that's their reality, then this really won't resonate with them. But for everybody else who may be on a journey of discovery and wants to search out some of the unknown, or what I call the alternative narrative, that is the subjects that are not brought up on the nightly news that we basically have to learn and study on our own. But many of these, as you see in modern esoteric, are very timeless, that have been around for a long, long time. And these were some of the takeaways I got when I was spending 6 months in Egypt, for example, or the many trips I've taken back and forth to Southeast Asia. Because in the Buddhist and Eastern traditions are much wisdom that we just don't, we're not acquainted with here in the West, or we're just not, it's not part of our culture to learn as it is for young, say, monks in training at a temple. They don't percolate into our Western tradition of teaching here too easily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you cover so much material in the book. I'm curious, you know, if you have thought about maybe specializing on some of the topics a little bit more, because you provide so much broad information, and some of the stuff is fantastic. It's almost like an encyclopedia, where you can kind of flip open to any page and you got a different subject, and it's great because for people who have a thirst or curiosity for the information, they don't have to sit there like this on their computers all day long. They can just take the book with them. Yeah. And I see how the progression of going to Egypt and then documenting sacred sites is relevant to the work, because I myself have traveled extensively around the world. I've seen plenty and lots of pyramids, lots of temples. Myself, personal experience makes a big difference. And esoterically speaking, you get exposed to the energy, you go into these places, you can, you really connect in a way that you don't do if you're just sitting there looking at images on the computer or reading a book. Right. The fact that you've documented all of these locations for people to kind of make their own pilgrimage list, they can kind of pick and choose, is a valuable and useful resource. And I think you hit it on the head when you talked about this new paradigm shift that we're in, and how we're going from an old control type paradigm to a different paradigm where we're kind of unlearning everything that we've learned. And unlearning is necessary in order to be able to kind of empty our vessel, so to speak, so we can fill up on new information. And I really resonate with that aspect of your work, because I think it's really necessary to continue that. I started in the alternative media industry back in 2005. And I've interviewed a lot of people in my career. I've had great topics and lots of information. And one of the things I always specifically went for was, can this person have a vision of something else besides just dumping information on people and kind of leaving them feel like they're slimed? That can happen. I'm sorry, you go on to some shows and it's like you get off and you're like, what is the point of living? I'm just going to go walk off the bridge. Everything awful. I mean, it really gives you that feel. I think you have a responsibility. If you're going to crack somebody's consciousness open, and you're going to allow them to see the matrix is a false matrix. It's an implanted type programming, given a million different ways, and you're going to crack that open. You really have to be careful and not leave people feeling like, oh my God, my life is it's a problem now, because they don't know how to find their way out of that. And if they don't know how to find their way out of that, then you're really just instigating a bunch of confusion, and you can be so much more productive with your work. You do that. You give a whole section of your book that's dedicated to the imagining of a different paradigm, where you actually talk about bringing people through the muck. You kind of give them a lifeline through the muck, let's go. And then you give them an imagining or something else to think about and ponder on. And I think that's so important. And if people are not doing that, it's scary. It kind of leaves a scary thing, don't you think? I mean, I applaud you for that. So this is a long way of saying I compliment you for doing that. It's a necessary thing. And did you feel that was necessary when you were writing that? Did you already know that? And had you experienced that with other people?
And for the same reasons you gave, because some of these topics can be very heady and even depressing when you realize the control grid that we're under. And once you kind of see outside of the matrix, that so few people do, and how to get there is quite a challenge, with many speed bumps in the road. But I've been always a very positive and optimistic person. So my friends say that I was just born with a happy gene. I've never been depressed a day in my life. I don't know what that means, but I have empathy and compassion for those that do. This is not me. So I'm always looking at a way to turn a negative into a positive. And this also goes on the macro level with what we're dealing with in the world right now. We have this oppressive body that's bearing down on us with this idea of creating this one world government, a one world religion, this new world order. These are real things that are happening right now. And we see the police state creeping up, the introduction of RFID chips, not only in our personal identification, but they're ready to go in our body if there was some kind of crisis where we all had to check in and get vaccine and stuff. And so there is very much we're walking on the razor's edge. There's very much the possibility that we can flip over to that, and World War III and environmental destruction and a terrible future for our children. And that's not what I want to see. I want to see humanity reach the golden age. I want to see some kind of meaningful disclosure with the benevolent ETs that are out there. And we can go into
oh yeah, we're going to talk about it all.
UFO ET stuff. Yeah, we're going to get into that.
We're going to get into it all.
Just to answer your question, that the final section in Future Esoteric is called Utopia. And I fervently believe that we have the opportunity right now in our lifetimes, Hillary, to usher this in, to begin this golden age, to release free energy technology. I would even like to see the disillusionment, dissolving of the money system, to get rid of the whole monetary system, to just yank the rug right out underneath these global elite bankers and just drop them and end their game right there. And that's all we have to do, is introduce the concept of taking care of ourselves, taking care of the planet, giving animals rights so this planet could survive. And these are utopian concepts. I understand that. But hey, if we can have this conversation and people can hear us and agree with us, we're that much closer, you know, and this is how it happens. These are how small ideas become big ideas and gain traction. And then next thing you know, maybe we are entering the golden age.
Well, I think we are in the golden age in some senses, because we have a breakdown of information and unlearning, but we also have access to information. Although it's only 4%, the surface web and the deep web are two different places, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit tonight too. I just did a show recently with a man named Stuart Trusty, who was talking about the Bitcoin, because I've been following the Bitcoin since June of last year. It has a very, very interesting story, and it also has the capacity, if it's implemented in a way that, you know, isn't controlled, because it does have a potential to be that, to free us from fiat money and move us into a digital currency. But the digital currency has the ability to become more of a globalization type format. So in some ways, the Bitcoin has the ability to continue a global, you know, a one world type feel by making everybody use Bitcoin. But everybody says, oh, Bitcoin, you know, it's a digital, you know, it's a fad. It's this, it's not. It's not. PayPal just released it as a payment option. We had the first debit card released in Bitcoin. People are starting to understand it more and more. So we have, I think, which is a slow drip type way of implementing a digital currency to get like old people like myself who grew up with like a phone that was still, you know, corded into the wall that you actually had to talk to and dial. Remember that? I think I saw one in a museum.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Well, I have teenage kids, and I tell my kids, I talk about these phone things. They laugh at me. They think it's funny. That's hysterical, Mom. But my kids teach me a lot, because they have grown up in this digital world that has a completely different feel than when I was like their age. And they have to deal with an online digital presence that their friends all do. And it's not like what we use it for. You know, we use it to promote ideas, be philosophical, share our content, our work, do shows like this. They're on there talking about their friends and all the political, social drama that happened in high school. You remember that? And did you?
Oh, yeah. It's all dirty laundry out for everyone to see now. Thank goodness we didn't have social media then.
That's the thing. It's like we have, and I was just having this conversation with my son a couple weeks ago, and he was saying how, you know, Mom, it's different. You don't understand. He kept saying, you don't understand what it's like for people, because, you know, their generation, it speaks a different language. If you don't text back right away, there's something wrong, and it creates like a psychological response. So it's almost like we have another generation coming up underneath us that has a completely different psychology than what we have. And I think in order to reach that, you know, to give our wisdom of us elders, you know, going into elderhood and becoming kind of like that moving on generation, to give the wisdom back to them, we have to use the digital technology. We have to implement the hashtags and put in Twitter account stuff and kind of speak the language for the generations coming up, so that they have the ability to access the information and to be able to share it. I really believe that Utopia lives in the consciousness of the kids coming up.
Yeah.
I have friends who talk to me about their children. They have all of these old soul type ideas, and I really believe that the answers to the problems we have on this planet today lie in the consciousness. And so what that then does is it shows us, well, we got vaccines, we have GMOs, we have a whole onslaught of things that can damage that consciousness, that seed gift that these kids have as they're growing up, and kind of contain it. And that really freaks me out. I mean, it really freaks me out, because it's kind of like, how do we stop that? How do we protect that innocence and also the intelligence that has the possibility? I mean, if you gave me Google when I was 10, I guarantee you I would not be the same person I am right now, because I would have been doing all of the research and digging, and I'm sure you would have too, at a much, much younger age. So they're giving us, I think they're asking us for help in some ways, because it's like, guys, you know, give us the information. I think they're going to eat up this kind of stuff that you offer, the kind of stuff that I talk about on my show. I think they're going to eat up that content, because eventually when they realize what they're growing up in is so contained and so controlled, that they're gonna just create a new way to get out of it. I was watching this movie last night, and it's called Dope. And it was about these 3 geeky kind of alternative kids growing up through high school. And it actually gave the storyline of who created the Silk Road in the deep web, which is the black market drug market.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the Ross Ulbricht story.
Yeah.
And it actually said in the storyline that it was a young black man who was just a computer tech and had 2 best friends. Nobody paid any attention to them in high school. They put all their tech work to work. They created the Silk Road, made billions of dollars off of it, used Bitcoin. It gave so many hints to the information that it was like, wow, somebody must have known something and put that into the storyline. And as a producer, I'm sure you understand that.
And as we see right now with Apple being subpoenaed by the FBI to allow them to have a backdoor in, because encryption is so good. And that's what allowed the Silk Road kids to get away with it as long as they did. So again, we're on this razor's edge between technology being our best friend or our worst enemy. And it can do either. But look at it this way, technology, or the internet is, I consider it like the new Library of Alexandria. It's all the wisdom of the world at our fingertips, but it's also a way to make bombs. It's also a way to do harm to people. But it's just a tool. And just like a hammer can help you build shelter, it can also be an instrument of a weapon to hurt someone. So we have to look at it in that way. And speaking of the younger generation, and I should probably use this as a segue to the How Weird Street Fair, this event that I produce here in San Francisco. Every year it gets younger and younger. So this millennial generation, they really attach on to electronic music and DJ music, which we were listening to over 25 years ago. And so I started this warehouse with some travel friends of mine that I met in India on Howard Street in San Francisco. And that's the play on words, How Weird Howard. It's grown in epic proportions. We're now one of the largest events here in San Francisco. It started out just a block party, but the younger generation loves it. And I go around to all the other events here in San Francisco, and it seems to be an older and older crowd, where we're a younger and younger crowd. So finding something that resonates with the younger generation that they can really grab onto and then feel like this is something that's going to help them in life. It's our, I would even say, responsibility as the older generation, passing the mantle on to them to give them something good.
Yeah.
And I talk about this in the introduction to Future Esoteric. And I had a great conversation with, well, many people in the field. But Alex Collier called me one day, and he was a contactee for the Andromedean, and I've watched all his videos. And he said that there's this concept where if an open and free society always gives the younger generation what they need, that we're always going to evolve, we're always going to expand, we're always going to get better. But when you live in a society that keeps secrets such as ours, then it keeps people bottled up. And you were mentioning how you worry about your children and others who are exposed to GMOs and vaccines. I would even throw on that list fluoride, which can calcify the pineal gland. And I even have a chapter in Modern Esoteric about the pineal gland, how important it is, and for people to understand that this is like our gateway to become interdimensional beings. This is our way to activate the pineal gland to become fourth, maybe even fifth dimensional or higher, to really become like all these stories we've been told. And when I was in India, I read the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And each chapter talks about a different yogi with incredible human abilities. And I thought, well, if they can do it, and of course it took a lot of training, and maybe sometimes they were reincarnated into a body that had this memory how to do these kind of things. But I thought if they could do it, then certainly we could do it. And we should have this discussion. And so in my utopian view, having schools that train us how to be astral travelers, how to be lucid dreamers, which we're already starting to get a grasp on. These are things that if the pineal gland were fully opened and certainly not being clouded with many of the chemicals that keep it suppressed, we could have these superhuman abilities ourselves. How about going to a class where you learn telekinesis, how to bend a spoon across the room like Uri Geller?
When you're 5.
When you're 5, that's right. Or telepathy classes.
I mean, God, imagine if we were teaching our kids this stuff.
Exactly, my point. And telepathy class. I got to go a little bit early tonight, Hillary. I'm enrolled in telepathy classes.
I heard that in my mind. I heard that in my mind. Here's my reply.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? Isn't that the kind of world we should be living in?
I mean, my background, when I got out of traditional education, I had studied psychology, and I absolutely rejected it after I got done studying it all, because it compartmentalized the mind and it put people into labels. And once you label a person and you tell them you have this, then it's a stigma that they then carry indefinitely. Then they medicate themselves and they do all these. I'm not saying that, and some people, maybe that's what needs to happen, but I don't know. I think if somebody's having, a shamanic experience, or telekinesis is happening, or you're having a telepathy event, how do you not know it's not that? I mean, they don't even put that into the diagnostic process. It's not, if you even talk about that, you're kind of categorized over here as this, this, and this. So I think we really need to revamp our psychology system. I think we need to rethink not only mental health, but we need to expand the whole genre to be able to include these expanded abilities of consciousness. And you're exactly right. I mean, if we cut fluoride out, let's give viewers a little bit of history of fluoride, Brad. Talk to us a little bit about why it's such a big deal, where this all comes from, because people need to understand.
Sure. Well, David Icke talks about it in his worldwide lecture, and I've seen many other references that it was introduced around the period of World War II, both by Hitler and Stalin, to those prisoners in the gulags, say in the Soviet Union or the concentration camps in Germany, introduced into the water supply because it will make people subdued. So they're less likely to riot, to fight with the guards. That just makes them nice and copacetic, easily moldable, malleable to the captors. And as we know, after World War II, many of the Nazi scientists came over to America, as well as the Soviet Union, in America under Project Paperclip. And this also included many of the NASA rocket scientists, such as Wernher von Braun, the father of NASA. Mm-hmm. But there were also these other scientists that did some pretty nasty things too, such as MK Ultra, the mind experiments that came over here. And many of these things were done very much unwittingly on an unsuspecting American public. And this continues on today with the fluoridation of our water. And as I mentioned earlier, it's known that what it does is collects around the pineal gland, effectively shutting it down. So even if you were doing intensive training towards opening up the pineal gland, you're not going to have quite the same effectiveness, because if you're drinking fluoridated water, it's calcifying, not to use.
It calcifies the pineal gland.
That's right. It basically, and there's pictures of it that you can find pretty readily available that show like a white type of plaque that forms.
And this is not a conspiracy theorist, type made up playground type topic. I mean, this is the Fluoride Deception was written, I forget when it came out. It's a fantastic book, and it gives the legitimate facts and history, black and white, about these uses. And I think we need to clarify that, because again, I go back to, the whole conspiracy industry and the alternative media information. I mean, you can't just take my word for it or Brad's word for it. You go out and you look at this stuff yourself.
Of course.
And, YouTube has a zillion different, sources on it. But you can actually find videos that will show you what the pineal gland should look like and what it looks like when it's calcified. And it also has a DMT ability. It releases DMT into the system. And they say when you die, this is a medical thing, when you die, that your body releases a large amount of DMT into your system. And if your pineal gland is calcified, what does that do to the death experience and your crossover experience? And that opens up a whole nother gambit of discussion, because I mean, you're dealing with an afterlife effect that you really don't know what you're dealing with until you're there. And if you don't have the right chemical process to really help propel your spirit to go out of your body into the afterlife, because your pineal gland has been that means that this agenda is, maybe knowingly or not, and you and I can argue that. I mean, we can talk about the knowing that, whether this is intentional or not, but this may be even a bigger agenda with the fluoride.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah.
And I just find it interesting that so many enlightened cultures on earth, such as the Egyptians or the Tibetans, had their own Book of the Dead. They spent their entire lives sometimes just studying what would happen when they die and how the crossover is going to occur. The Buddhists would say it's about 49 days before you're reincarnated, and that we're on this wheel that just goes around and around. We all have lessons to learn, and whether we learn them or not is somewhat dependent on how quickly we need to come back and get a new body. And they would study this intently and very intensely for their whole lives. And we don't know anything about it. So we
don't even talk about it. We're afraid to talk about it. I mean, God and death and politics are like the worst subjects you can bring up because everybody's got an opinion on it. But what I noticed in the United States was, I'm not sure how it is so much in other countries, but I live in New York. We have a fear culture around death. It's like we have to do every day something that's going to prevent us from dying. You go to another country, they celebrate death. Death is a party and a parade through the village.
Right.
Here we're like, devastated, and it's the worst thing ever, and oh my God. And so I think it goes back to cultural programming. We're kind of programmed, and the United States has one of the highest levels of fluorinated water. I just did kind of like my own little self-study just within the last few weeks of kind of checking out the cities that are fluorinated versus IQ levels. And I wanted to find if there was a connection between IQ level, the lowest and the highest, according to how that kind of related to how, fluoride played a role in their water supply. It was pretty clear that the areas that have the highest fluoridation in the water have the lowest IQ. So we're talking about, an issue that not only affects a lot of spiritual and esoteric elements of our lives, but also our intelligence. And then you have United States doing like the core program and things that are like, oh, maybe we should do school on Saturdays and push. When you're dealing with children who are not you know, they're born in a different physicality. I think that they really have a different physicality because you're dealing with GMO infiltration into the food system, which actually has the ability to alter genes.
Yep.
And it also has now been traced back to autism. The Amish in the United States who don't vaccinate.
Perfect example.
They don't have any of it. They have 0 autistic children.
Yeah.
0.
Yep.
How can we live consciously and not have that plastered all over the front pages of everybody's newspapers and, you know, iPhones and, you know, nightly news programs? How can we not be talking about that? If we don't sit and talk about this, then we're to blame for the result as well. The people who stay quiet are just as much to blame for these things as people who actually intentionally know and set up these kind of things so that this happens. But yeah, I mean, we're dealing with a whole nother level of manipulation when we talk about what happens when we die. If we have a calcified pineal gland,
right,
we can't release the DMT. And we look at ancient cultures who had obviously much different understanding of physics and spirituality and, you know, the whole connective thing. And that's obvious in the megalithic sites that have been left behind all over the world. Doesn't matter what culture you go to, really. We have something left behind that gives us, you know, things encoded into these structures, mathematics, understanding different levels of things. And, you know, we sit here in our history because our history's been manipulated. You know, our history's been manipulated. We haven't been told the truth. We don't know really who we are. No. We've been unplugged from everything. And then we're drugged and we're subjected to all kinds of chemicals to keep us. So that said, how depressing is that, right? What would happen if we detoxed all of that out of our everything? I mean, we go back to your Utopia view. It's like we would be a different human being. We would be a different species. I don't know. That's a rant. So I have no question.
No. And I would like to add to that. And I'm glad that we're having this free form discussion because I really appreciate it when I can learn something. And you're very knowledgeable and we're very much on the same page with this kind of thing. And in the book Future Esoteric, I leave it off on an optimistic note with the Utopia section. If I were just to go up an elevator, say, with you, and I had 30 seconds to pitch both books, I would say Modern Esoteric starts way back in the beginning. Antediluvian civilizations here on this planet presents quite a bit of evidence that there had been many high-tech civilizations that have been on this planet, albeit with a much smaller human population or other entity, but very advanced. And there's quite a bit of evidence that can be found around the world. And it comes to this modern age. Before we get there, there's a breakdown of the secrets and the basically police state, New World Order affair that we're presently going through. But even though they're doing this to us with our health, and the last chapter in the secret section is the unhealth industry, the final section in Modern Esoteric is called Thrive. And this is things that we can do for ourselves. And let's face it, if we can't take care of ourselves or if we can't love ourselves, who else can we love? And I want everybody to live at their optimal performance ability. And I'll have to tell you, Hillary, writing these books has made me stronger, healthier, wiser, and potentially living a longer sick-free life. I rarely ever get sick. And this is what I want everybody to start considering, is that we are being attacked in a multifaceted front of different toxins that are affecting our body. If we can't get them out of there, we're going to die prematurely. And this is exactly what the controllers want. So we're not taxing the system and collecting Social Security. They would just as well happily see us drop dead in our 50s or 60s or 70s. I just turned 50, and I realized that I had a lot of different things that were building up that I have to detoxify and get out. And I found the solution, and this is what many of the things I write about in the Thrive section of Modern Esoteric.
So if somebody was looking for a place to start with that kind of rebuilding, where would you suggest they go? I mean, like, what was the first thing you decided for you was what needed to change?
Well, first, my lifestyle. I've always been very active, and I always thought it was 80% exercise and being active, and I still am very active. That's never going to change. And I thought it was maybe 20% nutrition. I've reconfigured those numbers to be about 50-50. So I've changed my diet, and that has had a huge impact. I do healthy shakes every day with fresh fruit, with vegetables, with supplements, with hemp seed oils, things like this. A lot of the food that I never really realized was so vitally important, especially the grouping of foods called superfoods. And I break that down in the Thrive section of Modern Esoteric. They're inexpensive too. You can eat well, and it doesn't even taste bad when you put it all in a blender for a smoothie. Put a little spirulina in there, put some protein powder in there, put some other kind of seeds or flax, and boy, the boost of energy you get from it is just amazing. Another thing I've discovered that I find is very important, and I'm just on the brink of fully understanding what this does, is what's called the MMS. Do you know what that stands for?
The MMS?
Yeah, the Master Mineral Supplement. It's
I've actually heard of it. Yeah, I've actually heard of that. I don't know too much about it, but I have heard of it.
I've been in discussion with the founder of it. His name is Jim Humble. We've exchanged emails, and he's even talked to me about publishing some of his books, and I'm certainly open to that. Well, I had those really nasty lesions on my skin called Morgellons, and the MMS has helped clear that up. And I've been to the dermatologist. They couldn't help me. I've tried just about every other remedy. But what I found that is so incredibly important about the MMS is that, well, first of all, it's chlorine dioxide. So the chlorine, we go swimming in a pool. There's chlorine in the pool, in a hot tub. It can kill the pathogens that can live on our skin. Well, the dioxide makes it non-toxic. So it just goes after the pathogens. And I had a yellow tongue, which is basically that my stomach had some pathogens in there. Don't know if it was something I picked up while I was traveling or just candida of the stomach. The MMS cleared that up. Pink skin, pink tongue again. And it's done a lot of other things. It's given me some energy boost. It's also, as I mentioned, cleared up my skin. So if any of your listeners have some of these lesions on their skin, I would say definitely get some of this stuff. Now, you can't get it here in the US anymore. The FDA, which I call the Fraud and Deception Agency, shut it down. I have to get it from Australia. And I would suggest getting some soon, because not only has it helped me with these other things, but reading their literature, and I'm still going through their own wiki page on the subject of all the different remedies and treatments it has. It could be a great cure for any pathogen. And I say pathogen, and that's basically bacterial, fungal, viruses, and even the introduced pathogens like Morgellons, which I believe is being distributed via chemtrails. And Sophia Smallstorm has a great video you can watch about them and how they have found that in some of the things that are being emitted out of the chemtrails. So I think we are all being introduced to it. And here's another test you can do. Get a glass of red wine or grape juice, hold it in your mouth for about 5 minutes, spit it out and see what's there. We all have these fibers in us, every one of us. Even if you don't have any outward signs of them coming out of your body, do the wine test.
What do you think they are, Brad? I've heard this argument, and I've seen the research, I've seen the stories, but what do you think the fibers are? What do you think their purpose is?
Well, just remember, they've only been known about for about 15 years. The first diagnosis was just around the year 2000.
Yeah, and if do you think that the chemtrails are actually dispersing them, or
Yes.
okay? So if they're dispersing them, what is their purpose? Because I think everything has a purpose, and unless it's a side effect, it's got a purpose. So what do you think these things are meant to do in the human body?
Well, they're slowly poisoning us. They're slowly sickening us. So as I said earlier, there is an agenda, a depopulation agenda, to have us drop dead in our 50s or 60s or 70s. They do not want what Henry Kissinger called useless eaters sticking around for too long. But what I think they're used for is that they are also like, they have radio transmission abilities, or they interact with all the frequencies that we're exposed to in the world today, such as cell phone towers, Wi-Fi. Right now, we're being exposed to frequencies. It's almost impossible in a Western society to get completely away from them. You'd have to go to a cabin far away in Alaska or Montana to be completely free. And even still, I'm not sure you are 100% completely free.
So are they, now these fibers, are they showing up all over the world in all the countries, or just where they chemtrail?
Well, I do have an idea of what they look like in people, and I have started to notice them from people around the world. I just did a trip to the Philippines the last 15 days of January. I did not see one chemtrail the entire time I was there. I have a friend who knows exactly what they look like, because right here in San Francisco, we play volleyball down at Baker Beach, and we see them all day. And it's so quite very obvious that they're creating cloud cover. They're creating artificial clouds by doing this. And
now
I
just want to interrupt you there for 1 second, because
No
I
problem.
wanted to add something. I was in the south of France in June, and every single day was beautiful. Actually, I saw clouds I haven't seen, like billowy, puffy, marshmallowy clouds I haven't seen in a long time. And it was either that or it was a clear sky. And then all of a sudden, there was actually a UFO sighting while I was there, and it was very close to where we were staying in Montcabrier, and suddenly the military moved in. We had Black Hawk helicopters flying over. Everybody in the village was going, "What's going on?" And then there were days and days and days of chemtrails, and everything started to kind of go south from there. And I have always wondered, and I've worked closely with Carol Rosin, who was Werner Braun's assistant for 40 years.
Yep.
Worked with her on the Space Treaty Project. And she said that one of the things that those are used for is for a radar system for UFOs. So the side effect then becomes the human health effect, but the main purpose of these chemtrails is to create an atmospheric kind of thing where the radar is able, it's a different kind of radar system.
Yeah.
And they need to spray the chemicals in the air in order to get more of a 4D type view of the atmosphere, so that when these multidimensional ships come in, or if they manifest and suddenly they're, hardcore ships, it shows up right away. And that's why you always see military ships fly in after any kind of sighting, because they're able to detect it with this new radar system. What do you think about that? Have you heard the same thing, or how do you feel?
Yes, I have, and I can add to that. Basically, the main component of what is coming out of chemtrails is aluminum, as well as barium and strontium, but aluminum in very tiny particulate matter. And what it's doing is it's making the atmosphere conductive. For the first time in the history of this planet, we now have an atmosphere that's conductive. It's always been neutral up until the last 15 or 20 years, when the spraying campaign has started, which corresponds perfectly with the introduction of Morgellons into the human species. So now we have these tiny particles that are everywhere. And even if countries aren't spraying, and it's mainly the NATO countries that do spray over Europe, over North America, over Australia, over New Zealand, but not so much the other countries. But it doesn't really matter, because with the movement of air, the jet streams and so forth, it does get everywhere eventually, much more so in the northern hemisphere than the south. but it has components of radar usage, because think about it, if the atmosphere is more conductive with these particles in the air. It also has a component that has something to do with HAARP, which are these great radio antenna arrays in Alaska, are 2 or 3. They're very top secret, but there's one that's very well known that you see a lot of pictures of, and I include in the esoteric books, that have the ability to steer weather systems. And the way they do it is they're giant microwave towers. So just consider that if they are able to project their beams in a certain way that create a bubble or a dome of heat, the systems of weather are naturally going to move around it. So they can create high pressure areas to move, or the terminology they use, to steer weather in certain ways. In fact, there's a very important document, your readers can find it. It's about the Air Force saying that they will control the weather of the planet by the year 2025. That's only 9 years away. They're well on their way to doing it. All these freak storms, a lot of the weather anomalies we've been seeing, many of them have been engineered. And it's high time this stops, because this is an experiment that we do not know what the end result is going to be. In fact, it could be very catastrophic. So people need to absolutely wake up to the fact that we're being sprayed, A, and B, these are elements that are getting into our body that may be very bad for our health, such as what I've personally seen Morgellons is able to do. And then C, know how to counter this and know how to improve ourselves if we're showing signs of having this stuff in us. And as I said, everyone I've done the red wine test with, this is several dozen people, 100% everybody has these fibers in them.
What's the red wine test again?
Right. So you just get a glass of red wine, hold it in your mouth, and spit it out. And you will see these fibers that come out of the tissue of your throat and your cheeks. And they're inexplicable what they are. Well,
I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that tonight. I'm going to try that tonight after the show. I'm going to go get a bottle of red wine, and I'm going to email you after with a picture. I want to know.
Please do. Please do.
Wow. So, you know, I guess then it can become somebody is now, I can feel it now. Somebody is now typing a search and looking up this information, or they think they already know it. When you go into the information for the first time, so a newbie comes in and here's this crazy thing we're talking about and says, no way, this can't be true, and then goes off and tries to find for themselves. There's an onslaught. I think it's just tons of information everywhere. It's so overwhelming. What do you suggest to people? What's your advice when people first start to get into this? How do you navigate the information in a way that keeps you from losing your mind and going crazy?
Well, that's a great question. Do you remember the first time you ever saw David Icke give a lecture or read one of his books? Yeah. It just seemed absolutely incredible. It seemed like every topic he touched on, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way. You know what? Now I say there is a way, and he was right all along. In fact, he's even said recently, it's nice to be vindicated. And thank goodness we have people like David Icke in the world who have basically opened it up. Yeah, so many of these subjects. And all I can say is, I look forward to meeting him someday. I'm actually jealous that you've had the opportunity to interview him, because I did 5 or 6 shows with David when he was first coming out onto the world platform, which was really interesting to do. I mean, he had written his books, but and I attended a lecture he had done up at Mount Shasta in Northern California, and it wasn't sold out, and it was scattered with people through the audience and lots of empty seats. He got up there and talked for 8 hours with a 20-minute break. And I have never in my life been so captivated by a presentation of information. I mean, it was, and interestingly enough, before, when I was first introduced to his material, I was working with a spiritual teacher at the time, and she says to me privately, go read everything David Icke has written. And I'm like, okay, I'll be the good little student. And off I went, and I got all his books, and I opened up the first page, and I was like,
what did she just tell me to do? And I think the only reason I got through every single one of his books, I read every single one, was because the person who told me to do it was so dear to me at the time. It was like, if she hadn't told me to do that, I would have thrown him and like never looked back. And because the information is so detrimentally scary to a programming that, you know, I had at the time. So my awakening in that sense was from David's work. And when I went to see him speak, it was just amazing. I mean, there's some things about his work that I don't know, you know, I've never seen certain things. I try to take my own experience, but what I did do, Brad, was I went through his books. I read the books that were sources. I kind of created a whole library of stuff and did my own work. I didn't just take it as truth. And that's one of my biggest advice to everybody is don't just take things for truth. Don't just regurgitate things. Really go out there and try to find, you know, do your homework, do your own research and back it up and track sources, because there's way too much just regurgitation of information in the alternative truth industry. People just get information and just regurgitate it back out without even going and looking up the information to making sure it's true before they pass it on. And that's a dangerous thing because it discredits a lot of information that is true, that people really have solid research into. And I think that we have a responsibility, if we're going to be in the public eye talking about things, to know what we're talking about and to be able to give accurate information to people. That's right. Anybody can start a radio show on any network or, you know, Blog Talk or all these different places where you just have to have a computer and a will to want to do it. But if you're not doing the research and you're not presenting the information in a way that's in integrity, then, you know, you're kind of diluting the whole purpose of being able to give this information. So it makes it really frustrating for people who are coming in, who have found their way synchronistically or whatever to the information and want to know more. And I think if we had a way of unifying the information and making it solid and giving it out to people in ways that was not woo-woo or kind of packaged like it's a fatty kind of thing, we would be reaching more people. I think the information we have needs to reach more people. And, you know, David was a great way to do that. And, you know, now he's famous and fills everywhere he goes and sells lots of tickets. And it's good for him, I guess. You know, if that's his thing, that's what he wants to do. Even though I've done 5 shows with him, I don't think he would book with me because he's so big. You know, you get to that point where you're big to book, right?
But the point I was making with David and to answer your previous question was basically how do I deal with the fact that in many ways we're on the vanguard of much of this information. You spend most of your waking hours looking into things that are interesting to you. You said you wanted to do the wine test. You're willing to try something new. You're willing to back up your research with additional research. And that would be how I answered it, is the way you answered it, is don't take us on face value. I offer references in my books. You tell people to do your research and back it up. In fact, my whole way of creating these esoteric guides was to use data points. And many of these subjects are very contentious. We're not really sure what is correct on things. And the example I give most frequently is, let's look at the Roswell crash in 1947. Something obviously happened, something came down that freaked out a lot of people, that got the military very, very interested in this, that made them change their story several times. But the people who were first on the scene and the living witnesses, many of which would not speak until their deathbed confessions about this. So there are hundreds of data points on what exactly happened at Roswell. And I'm friends with Joseph Farrell, who did a book on it, suggesting that they were Nazi UFOs. Another book has done an entire volume on the fact that they were Japanese UFOs. On the other hand, you have the military account that it was a balloon test with crash test dummies instead of aliens. But by far, the bell curve, I'll use my head as the example, those data points suggest that it was, in fact, an ET craft and the bodies were extraterrestrial. By far, the huge majority, 90% or more, point in this direction. So by connecting all these data points and putting it together as the most likely scenario, because this is where the most amount of eyewitnesses and the most amount of research has centered itself, that I will confidently say, I believe it was a crash. Actually, it was 2 UFOs that hit because of radar jamming. Even unbeknownst to the military at the time who created this crash. One went scurrying off 150 or so miles away and wasn't found for another couple weeks, whereas the Roswell crash was found within days. And the military didn't even identify it. They had no idea. It was the rancher, Mac Bressel, who basically had to go to the base and say, hey, you guys ought to come down here and take a look at something on my ranch, because it ain't right. And they collected parts of it, and the story goes on and on. But basically, that's how I do my research, is I look at the data points. And I come into this objectively. I have no skin in the game, shall we say. I just want to find the truth. It's always been my goal in life. I just want to get to the bottom of things. And that's why I find these subjects utterly so fascinating, and why I spend so much time looking into them, researching them, and then talking about them, hopefully as articulately as I can, to try to break them down into simplistic ways that people can understand them. And just like David Icke was so very much on the vanguard of introducing so many of these subjects to myself and you included, and us at first going through cognitive dissonance, which I love. The quick little example is when sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It creates a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect that core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit with that core belief. That's why there's so much blowback on things like chemtrails. Just trying to have an intellectual discussion with my friends and saying, look, guys, you saw that thing fly over. It went start and stop.
It's a plane trail.
And it lasts for hours and it turns into a cloud. Look, the first step in the scientific method is observation. We're all scientists. We're all researchers. We're all observers. Use your own eyes. Don't believe what they're telling you on the television. We have caught them in so many lies. They've lost all sense.
They lost their credibility, Brad.
Their credibility long ago.
We're not the majority. That's the problem. The problem is that we are not the majority. I believe in the 100th monkey syndrome. And
yes,
being
so do I.
the year of the fire monkey, I believe it's possible. This might be the year where we infect consciousness with this reality of truth. You know, I have a problem with Roswell, and here's my problem with Roswell. I've done a couple shows with Phil Corso Jr. Many years ago. We were talking, his father wrote The Day After Roswell. It's probably one of the most famous books on the subject.
Yeah.
My problem with Roswell is that most things in the modern day UFO industry go back to Roswell and use Roswell as the catalyst to all of the theories and all of the things that have come since. I've worked with the Native Americans in the Southwestern United States, and I've been very, very lucky to have done that in a very intimate way, where I've been able to access the myths and the stories and some of the deeper meanings of the rituals and so on. And the star being stuff that they have in their culture, I mean, it's kind of like the matriarch that we don't talk about in megalithomania. It's kind of like, you know, all of the things that we don't really mention in history. It's starting to kind of come out in a revamping of ancient history, is that, you know, this world is not only a lot older than it's been, but we've already been exposed to a tremendous amount of different thought that we don't acknowledge. And I think that when you start to look at the Native American star being mythology and the realities that they hold, I have to tell you, it kind of gives a whole nother spin to the UFO stuff that most people do not take into account because they're not exposed to. They don't understand or they don't know. And not a lot of the Native Americans will come out and talk about it. They're starting to because they think that it's time to do that. But for a long time, it was secret, inner circle, privy type thing. And unless you knew, you don't know. And unless you've been told by somebody who's credible, you don't know either. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it gave me a different perspective on the UFO material because it brought it back to more ancient times, and it just was anchored right. It just felt right. And their interaction with UFOs and star beings is much different than the account that we find in the UFO argument. Like, you know, okay, ancient aliens, no offense, all right? Okay, I like the show. I started out liking the show. I've interviewed a lot of people in that show, but my problem is that because it's become a media sensation, because it's become popular, everything they have to put new information in it. They have to do a new season, and then now everything is everything is ancient alien. Everything, you know. Next thing I know, the grocery store is going to be an ancient alien artifact because ancient aliens said so. And do you know how many people come to me and say, "Do you know what I saw in Ancient Aliens? This is what's happening." And they take it for truth and they run off and tell as many people as they can. So my problem with Ancient Aliens then becomes you can't make everything go back to ancient aliens. It's impossible. Okay, I just don't believe that that's doing the right thing. But they do have some good information. I'm sure your segments are great. But the problem for me is that when you commercialize information, you have to remember that most media is in this old paradigm where it's about ratings and money and popularity and what's going to sell, and they don't care about the truth a lot of the times. It becomes a product to market. And I have a problem with that. And I think that if people were to be let in on some of the Native American truth, they would see a completely different perspective, and then we would also get a better idea because they have stories of interaction. Oh yeah, communication, artifacts being traded, all kinds of stuff.
I'm glad you brought that up because not only Native Americans, but really a tradition around the world. The Mexican government just did this huge dump of artifacts about 2 years ago of all these clay pots and stels and different designs with undoubtedly UFOs, undoubtedly extraterrestrial creatures. So there's no doubt in my mind that there has been an interaction and an ongoing meeting of these star people with indigenous people, and even up through the modern age. That Roswell is just famous because it's famous,
right?
For the only reason. There are many crash recoveries before and after, but this is the one that catches the attention, largely because of Corso's book. And I certainly have used some of his material, and including some of the list of backward engineered technology that Phil Corso Sr. says came out of that, and many of those things do check out. That there are data points that also show that a lot of the technology, because look at the trajectory we've been on with technology. Our grandparents were born in the age of horse carriages, and when we were little kids, we were already in outer space and walking on the moon. And who knows what else has been going on with the secret space program. Yeah. And the breakaway civilization that Richard Dolan talks about. I had dinner with him last month when he was in the Bay Area doing a talk, and at the table was also Jacques Vallée, the famous UFOologist, who is the French character in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, was based on Jacques Vallée. I mean, so these guys are legendary, and they're bringing this whole narrative together. Because remember, the official account is total deniability. So none of this is supposed to have happened. Yet we have a plethora of evidence that it has happened. And it has happened for a very, very long time, as you brought out with the the contact with Native Americans and the petroglyphs, which show big heads and crowns around them like an aura. And this ties into my research with the Sacred Places books, because when I was working on Sacred Place North America, I was going to all these sites and into Canyonlands and the Sago petroglyphs and photographing them and checking them out. I'm a really tall guy. These are really tall. These are like 8, 9, 10 feet tall. And I mean, we can talk about some of the giants that have been found in North America too, with the double rows of teeth that were also that tall, that may be Anunnaki or some other progenitor race that had been here. But the storyline of planet Earth and the entities that have either visited us or have also maybe lived here is quite a rich and long legacy. And yeah, much more research to be done on that subject. But
yeah, I think we have to take that into consideration, because if we don't, I mean, I think anybody who believes we're the only life in the universe is kind of left in the Stone Age. It's like, where do you get that perspective from? It's from a lifetime of programming and education that is just, I think, indoctrinated into us, and we just end up kind of regurgitating it and getting our degrees and moving into our 9-to-5 jobs and, you know, go until we get to the end and we realize maybe we've wasted a lot of time and energy on things that haven't mattered. And I know one of my motivations throughout my life has been, I don't want to get to the end of my life, whenever that is, and say, God, I wish I did all that. I want to do all that. And then get to my end of my life and say, I've done it. I've contributed something useful. You know, maybe my radio shows will be left behind as a useful tool for other people seeking information. I'm very specific and clear in who I want to talk to and have conversations with for a reason. And it's like, okay, great. And hopefully my pineal gland is not too calcified by then. And I'll be able to make sense of the DMT interaction that's going on and cross over like an Egyptian and go off into the constellation over there. I mean, I don't know. I just think that life has so much to offer. And when we get stuck in this hamster wheel, you know, we go round and round and round and round, and we don't look anywhere else. We're selling ourselves so short, and we have such a possibility to change the world now and to assist the younger generations in continuing that. And a lot of the focus is on things that are distractions. And I don't think people really know what to do with their anger. I think the first thing that comes out of this information, when we're kind of talking about this as we go, you go through this crack in the psyche, you get exposed to information, you have your breakdown, you have your aha epiphany moments, but then you get mad. Yeah. You get mad because you've been duped.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I got mad in my late 20s because I was lucky to find my information path to that early. Let's say you find this information when you're 70 and you've spent your whole life doing all this. I mean, the anger is justified. So how do you tell people, God, you know, what do I do with this anger, Brad? You know, I'm so mad and I want to just go out and burn everything and do all this stuff. I created my radio show as a reaction to, I need to do something. Not everybody can do that. So how did you deal with the anger that you got exposed to? I'm sure you had some level of it when you were first starting out.
Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of things that still make me upset. I've always believed that the pen is mightier than the sword, and the nonviolent doctrines of Martin Luther King and Gandhi. There are ways to change the world in a nonviolent way, and that's certainly the path I'm on. So lashing out in a physical anger kind of way has never even come into my mind. It's not part of my thought process at all. But how to manage that anger? Well, these are largely my takeaways from spending years in the East, in Buddhist countries, and the way that they handle many of these situations. Some of the poorest places I've ever visited also happen to be some of the happiest people I've ever seen. So that's quite a paradox, that maybe all this materialism that's piled on to our existence and how we're only going to be important and successful people if we're rich and we're beautiful and we drive a great car and we live in mansions. Well, these are illusions. And this is what I realized early on, that the American dream we're being sold is just one big illusion. So the Buddhist way of dealing with a lot of these things, first of all, there's no reason to be negative about anything. Negativity is merely a frame of mind, and it's only going to drag you into more negativity if you let it fester. It's like a wound that gets infected. If you don't treat it, it festers and it gets worse and worse and worse, and it could ultimately kill you. Same thing is true with negativity. A friend of mine just told me recently, who's been studying some Buddhism, that anytime you're confronted with something that seems like it's insurmountable, that it's on the surface it could be a terrible thing, put out the welcome mat. This is my welcome mat. This is introducing something negative that has come into my life, but you know what? I'm going to adapt to it, and I'm going to make something out of it, and I'm going to turn it around, and it's not going to affect my being. And that's the real important thing about negativity. Don't let it affect your being. This is a beautiful planet we live on. I just came back from the Philippines. This was amazing. So amazing. Saw one of those little tarsier monkeys about that size, close up. It's just beautiful. Life is an adventure. Travel along that path and go out and see and do things. And that's why I include travel information to all the destinations in my Sacred Places books, because I feel very strongly that people need to go to these places. Don't just read about them because I told you that it's a cool place. Go there.
Yeah, go. Yeah, go.
And just
I got in the car last summer, or no, 2014, 2 summers ago, and I drove to Poverty Point Mounds in Louisiana.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I know that it's one of, I think you wrote about that in one of your travel books.
Yeah. One of the oldest.
Well, yeah, and it was right before the World Heritage put that on to as a protective site. So when I got there, I was sad because felt like nobody was taking care of it, and I needed to move there and be that caretaker. And it was so profound because my sister and I traveled together. We did our first road trip together, and we had traced our family back to Natchitoches, which is the county where a lot of the mountains are found, and Poverty Point's a little bit south. But so there was like a family connection there for me, and we just got to experience that. And it's like if we hadn't done that, it would just be another mound picture on my computer with no real relevance and experience. And I know not everybody's capable of getting in and going off and doing these things, but that's because of the old programming.
Right.
It's because we're stuck in the old matrix. And if everybody was freed from that, they would be able to go and experience these places that they're called to. And people like you that catalog these places for people like me who say, oh my gosh, I have to go. I feel the energy. I have to go. I need to go climb the pyramid. Where do I go? I open up Brad's book and, oh, okay, there it is. There's coordinates. It's necessary. Otherwise, you could find it online, but if you have it all in one place, and you create your own, the Native Americans believe in pilgrimage. A lot of cultures believe in pilgrimage, going to these places, making a pilgrimage, doing spiritual work there. I think in modern day, we need to create our own sense of pilgrimage and our own calling. And, how do we create a sacred relationship with Earth? I created a Love Breathe for Earth back in 2014, and we did 12 global meditations. And it was just a phenomenal thing. And the whole point of it was to go out into nature someplace, spend some time meditating on your memories of love, because that creates the chemical reaction in the body. Then the chemical reaction in the body interacts with the plant world, and then the plant world, and you have this great thing happen. And it was amazing, the stories, that people wrote in and said that they had these experiences. And the kids, some people sent pictures of their kids doing it, and their kids had these moments of connection with the earth and sacred places that have had a lot of prayer work put into them, pilgrimage work. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what you believe. It's an energy, just like a church holds that energy. When you walk into a church, you feel that, even if you're not, of that church or of that belief system. I think we have to kind of make that back into our lives. We have to work that back in. 9/11 Memorial is a perfect example of a modern day pilgrimage site.
Yeah.
They're turning it into a Disney World kind of thing, which disgusts me.
Ugh.
It disgusts me. I went down there July 1st of last year, and they had these, you know, those cattle herder type things where they put the people through these lines, and you have to go. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about, right? You ever been to an amusement park where you have to stand in line for 2 hours and you're kind of They had that right in front of the museum to get into the museum, and it just felt like it had been turned into this rotating, money-making, cattle herding type feel, and everybody was sad and depressed and just kind of feeling the trauma of all of it. And I thought to myself, oh my God, they've made like this memorial. And I think there's a lot of esoteric symbolism in the way they've set up the platform. In fact, I actually compared the layout of the 9/11 memorial to the layout of the Great Pyramid, and you can almost identically lay over a cross-section of the Great Pyramid into a picture of the 9/11 site. The museum that goes underground matches the underground chamber underneath the Great Pyramid. Whoa, I'll show it to you. I'll send it to you. Yeah, it's actually pretty, and nobody cared. I did it. Nobody cared. The crickets went off, and nobody cared. But I'm like, God, if everybody just paid attention to what they've done,
right,
out of this place, they would see.
We're all on fluoride.
Right. Oh, right. They all have, you know, calcified.
They got that fluoride look. Egyptian pyramids.
What?
Fluoride look.
I want to go buy a soda pop.
I was going to add something when you were saying about with your kids and doing this road trip and pilgrimage, is that we don't have rituals in our lives anymore. Maybe a few very religious people do, but they're pretty antiquated. We don't have tribes in our lives. Who's our tribe anymore? Who, beyond our family, who's our tribe? Where's our pilgrimage? Where's our rituals? We've given up the best things of what religion, in my mind, what it was really all about, what really brought people together. And the best things about primitive humans was that we had a community. We always had a community. We relied on a community. Nobody wants that anymore. And
they do have it. They have it in Facebook.
Yeah, but something's lost. It's not a face-to-face. Where's the storytelling anymore? Where's the sitting around a campfire and entertaining each other the old way we used to have television, by staring into the flicker of a flame? So much of this has just been discarded, and I question why. And for me, there's a longing, and I always get a group of people together that we hang out at Baker Beach. That's my tribe. And we go camping, and we have a great time telling stories and singing songs, and go sit in these hot springs in the Sierra mountain range, and nobody ever wants to leave when it's over, and you have a longing for it when you leave. And I think if people would try to reintroduce this in their lives, as well as what you and your sister did, which I highly commend, taking a pilgrimage to the land of your ancestors. And I did this when I was doing my book, Sacred Places Europe. I was the first American lineage in my family to go back to the family farm in Norway and see it. And they were so happy to see me. It was like, wow, we've been waiting for you to come back, and embrace me with open arms. But for me to see a little bit about who I was, and to see wow, this is where my people came from. Amazing. It was something that will stay with me forever.
Do you think that perhaps, you know, being a human incarnate right now and knowing what we know about biological memory, DNA memory, the things that have come out scientifically to say that, you know, we do carry the memories of our ancestors inside of us. And they have just talked about how trauma can be held within the DNA. And then we can kind of have these episodes of upset that we don't understand quite. And this goes back to the psychology thing I was talking about before. It's like, if we're not incorporating the realities of our full human potential, then we're missing a lot. And we can't trust the experts in different fields when they're working on an old paradigm. We have to be able to say, well, wait a minute, maybe this is a past life thing. Maybe this is, Grandma Josie's trauma that she had, or if you have a murder in your family or something along those lines. And as you feel called to go to Norway, how do you know that's not some part of some bigger than you type genetic healing that you hold for your family line? We hear a lot of talk about royal bloodlines, bloodline work. I think we all have royal bloodline. All of us, all of our blood families are royal in a sense of important and relevant and necessary to understand. And, if somebody thinks they're really, really spiritually evolved, I would love to see them with their biological family for like a holiday and see how well they all get along. Okay? Because some of the toughest challenges that we face are in our biological families, our close, intimate partnerships. And I don't know. I mean, it's easy to get along with a spiritual family sometimes. It's easy to get along with our acquaintances and our friends. But the biological family dynamics, I think, offer a really, really special gift if we're able to navigate that well and in a healing sense. And how do you do that without working with pilgrimage and ceremony and ritual? Can you imagine meditating with your biological family or your most challenging biological family member and getting to a place of higher consciousness with them where you can actually find, I think that I really believe this, Brad, because I've done this with my sister for the last 2 years. And as I've done this with my sister, we've had bigger, broader awakenings within our family that we just did not expect to happen, but it has. And if we get together and we meditate in a room, when I meditate in the room with my family members, and then I'm just talking about clearing your mind and seeing what comes, oh my gosh, it's profound. It's like everything inside of us, and we all have the same feedback. It's like everything inside of us is enhanced. And I think the breakdown of the family is one of the constructs within the control system that has been purposefully infiltrated to break up and dysfunctionize.
Yeah, you have a good point there. And I guess I'm one of the few people saying that I really love my family and I can't wait to be around them, because a lot of people complain. And hopefully they like my company too. But I'm flying out to see my dad and his wife and my older brother. We're all going to go skiing in where my dad lives in Aspen, Colorado next month. And we get together on a regular basis, even though we're all kind of scattered. But you're right. Family is hugely important. And
have you ever meditated with them? Have you ever meditated with your family?
Not in the traditional kind of way, because they're just not really into it. I should try it. I should try to ask them to do it.
Try it, please. And then come back on and tell me how it was.
So what would you recommend for a first time?
Well, for me and my sister, the first time we meditated together was on a beach at night.
Okay.
We had reunited in this beautiful way, and a friend of mine had said, hey, come on down. I have a house down on Cape Cod. So we went down and we stayed and walked down to the beach at night. And I turned and looked at her and I said, you want to meditate? She's like, yeah. I mean, nobody'd ever asked. I'd never asked. It's like sometimes we just don't ask. We don't even bring it up. We might think it, but we don't bring it up or we don't talk about it. So we did. And
in what way? Just sat down and were quiet?
We sat down next to each other. She was just next to me, and we just got quiet and got into our space and meditated quietly for a while. And then we lost track of time. A few hours went by, actually. And then we shared our experience. And she had a lot of similar experiences that I had. I was experiencing kind of a connection to the water and the lights on the water reflected off of the stars and the moon and the wind. I mean, all of the natural elements were kind of interplaying. And so I was having an experience of kind of expanding into the natural world around me. And she had the same kind of thing happen. And what she had explained was she had seen kind of in the sky, because she opened her eyes here and there throughout it, kind of like a grid or a net type reflection. interestingly enough, I had seen the same thing when I came out of my meditation. So we were both kind of giving feedback to each other afterwards of what we experienced and what we both saw and felt and how great that was. And then we realized it was 3 a.m. in the morning. So it was almost like there was a time anomaly that had just kind of like, whoop, there goes two and a half, 3 hours. It was just amazing. And then we had a great sleep. We went back to the house, woke up the next morning and like, let's do it again. Because it was fun. We had a fun time and we had good feedback. And so since I started to work with her like that, and we work with each other like that a lot, like I'll do that with my friends. Hey, you want to meditate? Hey, you want to go out Friday night? Or hey, you want to meditate? That's kind of like how it comes off sometimes. But hey, can you imagine if we started to ask each other, hey, you want to come over and meditate? Let's see what happens. And then start to just give each other feedback. The following few nights after that was when Love Breathe for Earth was discovered, if you will. We went to a beach to meditate together again through a solar eclipse. And we were done. We walked over one of the dunes and somebody had written the words love and breathe into the earth, into the sand. And we stood there and we looked at it and we're like, oh my gosh, what a great message. So we just kept pondering it. And then I said, what happens if you are in a state of love? You know, you get yourself into a state of love. You focus your energy on love memories, just like PTSD. People are focused on the trauma and they have all of these physical symptoms pop up in their body and all kinds of things happen, right? It's documented. Well, what if we had like a love PTSD type thing where we focused on our memories of love? And then it kind of made me think about the chemical reactions and how that interacts with the natural world. And then you offer that in a breath to your natural world. Because there's a lot of spiritual teachings that talk about how sacred the breath is and how simple and beautiful of an act that inhale and exhale moment is. There are lots of things that you can connect to that. So I created an idea wrapped around gathering people. She worked on, documenting some of it. And together we worked for from April 2014 to September of 2015. And we had coordinated about 12, like I said earlier, 12 global meditations where we were creating kind of an event for people to, just kind of participate in whatever way they called, without any dogma, without any protocol. You don't have to believe anything. You can be anything. All you need to do is find a moment of time to sit and meditate and think consciously of your memories of love. Whatever that is to you, because love will make people argue. If I try to tell you what love is and you try to tell me what love is, that's a useless conversation, because you might have a different feeling of love because you have different experiences of love, and vice versa for me. So if we just focus on what has made us feel like summer inside, and we create that chemical process after a long enough period of time, it takes about maybe, I think, 2 or 3 minutes to solidly change the chemical reaction in your body. Science has proven the interaction between human emotion and plants. And then you begin this whole cascade of different experiences. And I did an experiential hypothesis for 2 years with 12 meditations. We had people from all over the world. And then what I did was I put all those locations on a big global map, and I painted those grids on huge 7-foot canvases. So I have a collection of huge paintings. And for me, that was my personal way of like doing a creative homage to the work. And so I'm in the process of writing up the whole story and kind of figuring out how I'm going to put that into a documented container. But what it taught me was, if I hadn't asked my sister that night to meditate on the beach, there is an entire story that spanned over 2 years that would not have happened.
Well, of course, you've heard of the Maharishi effect, where the great guru Maharishi, who the Beatles studied under, they gathered several thousand people on a specific date, as you mentioned, and they meditated, and then they watched the news that night or read the newspaper the next day to see what happened at that time. And there was a discernible drop in violent acts. Like there was no suicide bombings in that time frame that they were meditating. And then there'd even be some nice stories, like two sides that had been adversaries came together in peace talks for the first time, things like that. So there was a measurable effect to group meditations. And it does show that our minds do have the capacity to be telepathic. And when working in conjunction towards a central goal, such as just putting out the message of love, that's all you really have to think about. There can be these discernible side effects that occur in the world. Now, a lot of critics would say it's just coincidence. But the fact that there were no real violent events that were happening, and that sometimes people would come together in ways that they never had for the better, kind of makes me think that there's something to it.
Yeah. So meditate with your brother, and maybe you'll go on a 2-year adventure and something will happen. I mean,
a good idea.
I think I've been tracking current events for a long time, for the last several years. It's just a hobby I have. I love to do it because I think there's a lot of esoteric symbolism in mass media events. In fact, I call them mega rituals. It's like mega rituals are like the ceremonies that happen in the Olympic Games. You can totally break down that stuff into esoteric meaning. Even mass shootings or mass events, stuff like that seems to have a code through it. And in 2012, I worked closely with Dr. Mark Gray, and we wrote a blog together, and we were writing about current events, and I would kind of track the intuitive stuff, and he would put things together, and it was fabulous. Lots of people loved it. But what we realized in 2012 when we were tracking this was that there's a substantial intelligence, whether it's a manipulated intelligence of the people doing and creating the event, or some other intelligence woven through the event, that if you're paying attention, and then there's a synchronicity that happens that starts to lead you and show you different things intelligently. I'm not quite sure, I did it for a year. I've done it since. It just seems to be very consistent. And I'm wondering if it's the same kind of intelligence that increases the peace and increases the sense of reconciliation and resolve after a large meditation around the planet of people's minds. I think if we really, really gave the human mind and heart its proper credit, we would realize that our full human potential includes the ability to influence and affect events around us. And so I think that's somebody, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there doing this work full time, and it's what they do, and they're showing it. But a lot of it that I've looked into has kind of a negative connotation. They're tracking like Satanism and dark symbolism and things of that sort. And I just think that we've been kind of tricked in some ways to see symbolism a certain way. Have you found that in your work?
Well, I have, and as you can probably tell by now, I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm just not attracted to that dark side at all. But I am in the capacity of a book publisher. I have a 5-book deal with Leo Lion Zagami from Italy, who comes out of the Illuminati families and comes out of these black magic rituals, and has basically turned another cheek on them and is now very intent on exposing them. So in the capacity of editing his books and getting to know him, I let him cover those subjects, because there is two sides of the coin on the esoteric front, and one of them goes into some really dark, nasty stuff, and that's not my orientation. But the fact that he has had firsthand experience and knows quite a bit about this, that I work with him in publishing his books and getting this information out there, because it is important for people to learn. And as you said about these group meditations, and if it were introduced as something that we all would want to do, well, there would be no more wars in the world. There would be no more acts of violence. Why? People wouldn't participate. I don't want to do that.
I think that would happen, but I think people would, again, it goes back to the breakdown. It goes back to the breakdown. You have to, most people turn on the news at night. I'm talking about the majority.
Right.
Turn on the news at night, and they watch all of the stories that are given to them. They take it for truth.
Right.
And they go off onto their day or their night, and they have that downloaded into them, and they see it that way. They don't have any concept of anything else. How do you see the mainstream media? How do we stop that? I mean, what has to happen really to get into the mainstream programming and break it up?
Well,
I mean, alternative media is doing a good job, but it's not enough. It feels like there's still another level that has to be taken. You know, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a chapter in Future Esoteric called Media Manipulation. And let's just break it down at the core level. In America, you have 6 corporations who meet behind closed doors and make decisions that none of us are privy to, whose many heads of board of directors of these media companies go to the Bilderberger meetings. They meet with the other global elite, and these meetings are not publicized whatsoever. So we don't even know what they're talking about. Yet they own the voice piece. They own the media outlets that shape our perception. As you said, most people will watch the news at night, and they'll go to bed and they'll think about these things, and they'll talk about it with their loved ones. They'll go to the water cooler the next day at work and regurgitate these storylines. Well, where are these storylines coming from? And this is what I talk about in Future Esoteric, is that these storylines are coming from this global elite faction, whatever you want to call them. Leo calls them the Illuminati. I prefer the term cabal. It's real. It's happening. It's provable, very much so on many levels. And they have an agenda. They have a self-serving agenda. This is how we know that they are not looking out for the benefit of humanity. They are in service to themselves, okay? And look, we knew growing up in school that the Russians were masters of propaganda. And oh boy, how we heard how they would just manipulate a story. Well, you think it's any different here? It's not. So we have a group of people who make these decisions behind closed doors that decide what storylines are going to be told. And guess what? All of the media outlets are on the same page. That's what makes it stronger. That's what really makes it stick, because it seems so real. If everybody's talking about the same thing, this is called the egregore. This is the group mind. And we can be tricked so readily, easily, because you had a great little post on Facebook today, and I commented that that we're hardwired for gossip. And this is who we are as human beings. We, in our primitive state, this is why I say we miss the tribe. We miss the little innocent gossips. Hey, where's Cindy? What's she doing now? Oh, she's getting some fruit. Yeah, there's a tree down there. It's ripe right now. You should go. We're hardwired for this. And since we don't have it anymore with our tribe, we get it off the media. And they know that. And so this is the egregore that Leo talks about in his books, and they manipulate it, they mold it, they shape it in a way that fits their agenda and gets their problem, reaction, solution, this Hegelian dialect, to do the things that they want to do to society, because they know if they can tell a lie and tell it big enough and keep repeating it, that we'll all take it to be true. This comes right out of the playbook of the Third Reich. And their propaganda methods there. So we have to see through this. We have to see through this, and we have to find information in different ways. And thank goodness the internet is still free, because this is our one vehicle to really grasp the subjects that are not being given out freely or distributed by the mass media. They do not want us to know many of these things. So this is our responsibility, in fact, that we have to just grow up. We can't get angry nor violent. We have to get through the cognitive dissonance of the disbelief that this does not correspond with our core belief, but our core belief has been shaped and molded by them and continues to be so. So really, to break out of the matrix, quite like the movie, you have to make that conscious decision to take that red pill, to go that way, to start seeing that everything that has been shaped to be our form of perception, much of it is not real. You know, we live in a fake world. So much of the things that are being perpetrated on us are fake and phony. And it's our responsibility to separate the wheat from the chaff and know better.
Wow, thank you for that. It's so true, and it comes down to manipulation, really. I mean, we've been very manipulated,
Big
and
time.
we don't even know we're being manipulated.
Nope.
So I think once we wake up to the fact that, you know, we understand we're being manipulated, what is manipulation, I think anger again comes back, because people get angry that they've been manipulated, and they get angry that they've wasted so much time. I mean, again, it goes back to the, well, now I'm 60 and I've wasted so much time and I was manipulated and I'm pissed. And I think that we have to be okay with being angry. Fluoride will dumb down your emotions to the point where you don't want to become angry. You don't know how to become angry without being an emotional wreck sometimes. And we have to learn how to be angry in a way that's constructive. We have to learn how to be angry where it's like a laser focused instead of a wildfire burning everything. There's a difference. There's an anger that can destroy everything recklessly without any kind of point. And then there's a laser focused angry. And I'm an Aries. So, you know, I get a little bit animated, right. So I get a little bit animated, and anger is something that comes into my space. And it took me a long time to learn how to understand my anger and to be, and as a woman, I think being angry is automatically like, you're like, you know, tarred and feathered, because God forbid you're a woman and you get mad, you're just a mad woman. And then that makes it worse. Right. But once you realize how to focus your, you know, your anger in a direction that's constructive, it's a power source within the human being that is exponentially, amazingly wonderful. I think people, if they can get angry and stay focused on exactly what they're angry about, without bringing in the artillery of everything that's happened in the past, and using it as ammunition, we're onto something that might actually reawaken things within us that enable us to be able to be more productive in coming up against powerful regimes that have all the money and have all the say. You know, why can a group of people get together in a room and have a discussion about what's going to go out every major media, you know, fraction across the globe? Because they have all the money.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, that's what it comes down to, is you have a power structure that's based on a money system that enables this kind of abusive situations to happen to people, where they get these kinds of manipulation things happen. I don't know if Bitcoin will change that. I'm not sure. I mean, I think Bitcoin because Bitcoin does not require a middleman. It also does not require regulation. And there's a level of anonymity that can happen. You don't have to reveal your identity in the purchase. It goes against everything the NSA stands for. You know, somebody accused me of being an NSA agent recently. I sat there and listened to that, and I laughed. I'm like, really? What?
No such agency. Well, as far as money goes, why don't you come to Burning Man and learn about the gift economy?
You know why I would come to Burning Man, honestly, is because as an artist, I could completely appreciate the installation.
Oh, you'd love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never made it. Have you been?
Oh, 17 times.
17
times. Early years.
Wow.
Yeah. I know the founder, Larry Harvey, and all the big players. I published a book called The Tribes of Burning Man. And so this is what has filled in many ways for this lack of tribe, is that people do come together. They completely function without money in a new construct called the gift economy, where everything is given away. That's your responsibility, is to give as much as you can. There's no thought of what am I going to get in. Right. Yeah. It's a beautiful concept, and you'll see how people change in a gift economy. And then that's in my chapter, The End of Money, in the Utopia section of Future Esoteric. I use that as an example of how we can think of different ways and different models to get away from this money system, which totally enslaves us in the human race and has been around for a long, long time, ever since Babylon or earlier. And it has always been used as a control mechanism. You take that away, and guess what? Every human being on this planet is a human being equal to everybody else. How about that? How about nobody has that kind of power to own the media, to own the banks, to make us go to work and do something we hate to do? I mean, if we're looking at new models of society, and eventually we're going to have to, because the one we're on is just a train wreck, and it's going to come to a very possibly violent conclusion, because it is totally unsustainable. And what we're doing to the planet is irrevocable in some ways and just absolutely has to end. So why not look at models of a utopian society that our children, and hopefully I want to see us live through it too, Hillary. I really do.
Yeah, I'd like to be alive. I'd like to have put in all this time for something good.
Exactly. And then you brought up the 100th monkey. So
yeah,
there could be this light bulb moment that goes off in all of our heads that we can just transcend the egregore, break free from this mind control grip and this matrix that we live in. And, you know, I talk in these simplistic terms, but that's kind of the way it is. And once you do start seeing the other side, you say you get angry. I've gotten angry too, but I've turned that around to constructive ways to get through this. And I think waking people up is the welcome mat. That's the way of doing it, is we become doers. We become people who have basically seen both sides of the coin. We know that the one side is much better than the other, and we just orientate ourselves that way. I saw a homeless guy just driving back a minute ago. Here's some money, dude. I don't know you. You might even just go spend it on drugs or alcohol. I don't care. I just give away as much as I can. I think it just gives me a good feeling for who I am. And that is what makes us service to others. And when you take that orientation, and this is what I do with the How Weird Street Fair, you know, I put on a party for 25,000 people, but I got to work my ass off. But it just makes me feel good because it makes them feel good. And if you can understand how our actions in this world and everything we do, from giving 50 cents to the homeless guy that I drove by, he might be buying a little thing of rice that keeps him alive today. Every little thing we do has this repercussion. It's like a pebble in the water that puts out these waves. Those waves are the repercussions of our life. So you make a decision every day in your life. Am I going to do something good for someone? Going to do this interview with you, Hillary, and hopefully what we've been saying has resonated with people and they're going to turn on to some of these concepts. These are the ripples, and these are just going to continue to expand outward and on and on and on until we do have this 100th monkey effect. And there will be a moment, and I hope we're alive to see it, when humanity wakes up in a big way. And the whole grid, the whole egregore mind control thing that's been set over us for a long, long time just comes tumbling down like a house of cards, because that's exactly what it is. There's really nothing really to support it, because they are so few that are doing this and that we are so many who are going to oppose it. It's just going to flatten in an instant. But then that's only the beginning. That's like giving birth to a child. The child is born. What are we going to do with it? Then we have to go into that direction that is going to lead us into the golden age.
When you were younger, when you were a child, did you have any glimpses of this future for yourself? Did you have any moments where you knew at some point or something that you would be doing this at 50? Yes, I did. Yeah, it was just one day walking home from school. I remember it perfectly. It was in grade school, like 3rd or 4th grade. And I was walking under this willow tree where I grew up. And just something came to me and says, you're going to be a great person if you take the right steps. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it would be. And I'm not trying to say I am a great person. It was just like, you can be this super influencer if you want to be. And you're not going to stay here in Illinois. You're going to go on. You're going to move on. And so at the time, I thought that meant I need to travel, which I did, and traveled quite extensively. But then I came to realize that I had this opportunity to either give voice to some of my ideas through book publishing, but also to give a voice to other authors that I've published. And that has been equally fulfilling, because I'm not really in this for my ego or to self-aggrandize myself or to make a lot of money. These things are really not important to me. I am here to help the human race advance. In whatever small ripple effect, pebble in the water way, I can do it. I'm going to do it. I will continue to do it till the day I die. And the last time I was down in LA last month,
shooting season 9 of Ancient Aliens. And I know you have a little contention with that, but the way I would answer that is it better that the world has Ancient Aliens, or is it better if we didn't? I'd say it's better we didn't. But so I gave a great interview, I thought, and the camera guy goes, "Hey man, you had some good things to say." And I said, "I aspire to inspire until I expire. So I'm just going to keep doing this till the day I die, and hopefully we bring up the resonation of the human race. And this prison planet that we live on can be the paradise and the garden, and this beautiful planet so worth preserving forever and ever and ever." And that's what I want to do in my own small, simple way. But if any of your listeners are here in the Bay Area and they've ever come to How Weird Street Fair, you know it's the best street fair in the city. We don't even have to advertise. We don't even market it anymore. We don't have to. We don't want to. For one, we're too big. And I maybe shouldn't even be encouraging people to come out on May 1st to Howard and 2nd for this event. But it's just a way that we all come together.
I mean, this is how I see it. We're kind of at the end of our hour, 2 hours. Thank you so much for...
Wow, that went quick.
Went by good. BradOlsen.com. You can go to his website. You can find all the good things there, his books. I have his books here. They're well worth the investment. And his travel book is wonderful because it gives so many options to do these experiential things. Brad, thank you so much for being here, for being you, and for listening to your calling and trusting the path and sharing it with others. And may everything go well for you in the future, and good luck with it all.
Well, thank you very much, Hillary. It was really great connecting with you on your show. And I should just add, CCC Publishing is where to go to see all the books, or my YouTube channel is Esoteric Series, and you can see my book launch lectures for both of the books you have there.
Right. And I think you're on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Esoteric channel, Esoteric Series channel.
We're out of time. I'm sad, actually. I think I could talk to you for another hour. But anyway, we're out of time. Thanks, everybody. YinRadioTV. I'm your host, Hillary Raimo. Until next time, stay well.